Good afternoon and welcome to this second session in the rapid value cycle. Today we're going to dive into that first quadrant of the rapid value cycle, getting to a business case, but with confidence in the return on investment for it. I'd like to point out that little QR code up in the top left-hand corner. Clicking on it will take you to a page where you get the opportunity to do a rapid value cycle assessment. Zjaén, could you just explain a little bit about the assessment and what they might get from it should they click?
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, James. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. So just a bit about the rapid value cycle assessment. It is a lightweight assessment at a high level that asks basic questions around understanding your investment, where you are, what your capabilities are, and then giving you a result back to understand how ready are you for investment. So firstly, are you ready to make an investment? And secondly, should you be making an investment? It then provides a high-level write-up of each one of the quadrants, as each one of the components of the rapid framework, and just gives you an idea in terms of what core areas you need to focus on, if it's people, platform, processes, from a data perspective, or just overall, being able to measure value. So it's a really nice, quick assessment to give you some early on results around where you need to focus on if you need to focus on data investment. Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, James.
Cool. Thanks. So yes, just as a starter point, happy to take any questions from attendees as we work through. The curlier, the better. We like to put Zjaén on the spot. We may, depending on where we fit, we've got a certain amount of time. We might not get to you till the end. But we've got a Q&A session at the end, so anything that you've got, drop it in and we will try and find a place to answer it. We've also got a few questions to the audience as we go through. I'll tell you when we're after some audience participation. But setting the scene, so we're in that first quadrant, investing confidently. So for the listeners today, what does investing confidently mean and why is it important?
Awesome. Thanks, James. Yeah, so I think let's maybe first cover confidence. Is you can learn a lot of stuff from books and academia and watching YouTube videos, but confidence really comes with applying what you know and doing it continuously and getting it to the extent that it almost becomes autonomous. So being able to invest confidently is really what we want to equip data leaders, business leaders, and specifically the C-suite and the CFOs with. To understand that when there's a request that comes in to say, we need to make an investment in a platform, or we need to appoint new people, or we need to build models, or make any form of investment in data analytics and AI, that can be done with confidence. So you don't question it after the fact. There's not a situation where the money gets spent and then halfway through everybody says, but we don't know why we spent this money. Being able to invest confidently means is everyone that is part of that journey that is committing to that investment is really clear about what the expected outcomes are, and all of them understand what the measurements are to ensure that investment happens. And one of the key things about investing confidently is the ability to measure it, track it, and also then improve it.
Cool. And that piece, there's obviously rigor in and the engagement with the business and the investor from the business side, that they're staying with you. So there's I've hit it myself, is like there's spending that we do sort of operationally versus something that's a big strategic investment. That and sometimes you go, hey, I need this function. Where does that might that fit in? I think it's strategic, but the business might think it's operational. Hey, this is a function you should have. How do we define in that block where that sits, where the spend comes and where the value comes?
Yeah, no, good question. Thanks, James. I mean, it's I want to use an example for this one, but maybe just expanding on that a bit is, more often than not, people don't know how to measure value, and what ends up happening is everything then almost gets seen as operational spending. It's a good way of justifying the spend and not really applying too much thought and going into putting too many guardrails in place. And we see this often with our customers, is where business cases get built, things get invested in, but there's not really value tracking or ROI tracking down the line. And a good example of this would be, we've seen this with one of our large customers in the telco industry, where a significant investment has been made into data platforms over the last couple of years. And one of the key things there was as well, we needed to just enable something. We just wanted to enable the data platform, and didn't really question about, but now that I have that platform, or if I want to make that platform, what do I want to be able to do with it, right? So it almost becomes an operational spend where you're sort of throwing money at the pot to say, but we need this platform, we need to do it. But then the same organization has gotten to a point now where they said, well, we really need to curb spending. We can't just continuously throw money at things. We need to question why we're making that. So that's sort of the operational spend, is just blindly investing and seeing it as, we need to do it to enable something. And that we always refer to that as indeterminate value. It's not something that it's easily measurable, not something that's easy to define. And also, it's an easy out in most cases, right? When you're sitting with your CFO and the CFO says, listen, I need to understand the tangible business value that's coming back to the organization, because you've now asking me, like, tell me what this is. And the problem is, not a lot of people are able to actually clearly articulate that, right? Because not everyone speaks CFO, unfortunately. And this is sort of, it comes back to the previous point, is if we can get the CFO to be data confident and to invest confidently, it almost makes that process a bit easier, because they can start prompting and asking the right questions. But from a strategic investment perspective, that is really where you start asking the right questions. So with the same customer, same industry, they've gotten out to a point to say, but we now really need to make a proper formal investment in skills and platforms and licenses, etc. What does that mean for the business? And instead of just doing something within 3 months because everybody said they need to, it's now really going back to the drawing board to understand, from a business perspective, what are our key strategic objectives? From a business point of view, what do we want to achieve? How does this spend enable us to achieve those objectives? In which way, shape, and form? And one of the big drivers, obviously, for them is revenue growth. So how does this really get us to this point of increasing that revenue growth? Obviously, some use cases can also be cost reduction, risk mitigation, or value at risk, which we've also seen in many cases in some industries, where, specifically banking, where value at risk is a big factor. If you don't make the investment, you're more than likely going to not realize that full value. But if we take a step back, so that first example is you investing in this platform, you don't really have a clear measure, a clear idea of what value you want to get out of it, and there's no ROI, there's no clear ROI, no clear way in terms of how you want to calculate it. Nobody's tracking it. People ask in the corridors, they say, why did we spend this money? We're not seeing the value. And the problem with this is, if it's operational spending, it doesn't get the strategic focus that it needs. So it's not just about aligning back to the strategy. It is about ensuring that when you make that investment, that the people that is needed to realize that value are all on the same page. So your business, your data, and your IT functions all see this as being a priority, and all of them work together in order to realize that value. Because we always make the statement, data analytics on its own cannot deliver any value, and this is specifically the reason for it. It's you need to have, if you're building churn models, you need to be able to embed that back into your business in some way, shape, and form. If you're doing customer segmentation, you need to do the same, and that's where the big value comes in. Obviously, the finance department shouldn't lose sleep around, the technicalities of this, but they need to understand that and then they need to have the level of comfort is, if you made the investment, am I going to see something? Is something going to come out of this? And this is sort of really the big split between strategic investment is intentional thinking about what you want to invest in versus operational spending, where people just spend money. And it's unfortunate, because we have also seen with tier one large companies where strategic investment is not really a thing for them. They will strategically invest in infrastructure and all sorts of other stuff. But when it comes to data analytics and let's call it broader, let's call it digital capabilities, there's not a lot of strategic investment. It's almost like sunk cost. We're just going to throw the money in there. We're not really going to worry about value. And because of this is they don't think about the repercussion, where we see the cycle where every 3 years people make an investment and then people start questioning the investment and then people start losing interest, and you sort of have this roller coaster that goes up and down. But the main thing here is that strategic investment really means is that it's linked to value. It's cross-functional. Multiple teams are at play here, and it's measurable. It's not a technical thing. If I can achieve one thing in my lifetime here on Earth, is to make sure that whenever anybody has a a business case, and that business case is based on enablement, that they just throw the business case off the table and push back and say, listen, but we need to really intentionally think about what we want to do. Because a good example, just to add on that one, is the investment into that data platform would have enabled them to do better revenue assurance. It would have enabled them to do better customer segmentation. It would have enabled them to build better products. But they didn't think that far. They didn't plan that far, because it just wanted something to be done very quickly.
And that bit on strategic investment. Under an operational thing, it's okay. You've got until the end of the financial year to get a return on investment. Under strategic, there is similarly, okay, you've got 6 months within the financial year probably to get this in and up and running. And I'll still do the plug. So I read about the data income statement yesterday, and this bit around, there are things, as we all know, there are hard and fast things that we can show value on, but then there is if we build it, they will come. But basically, in doing this gets us this. Does that sit on the strategic side still?
Yeah.
In things that we might get out of the back of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's so the
bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, so I think if we look at something like the data income statement, it's the main focus there really is about the strategic investments and mainly that. And the main reason for that is, it's if you have the ability to measure it, the next thing that you're able to do from this, and this is, we'll get to this later on in our series, and this is sort of building a bit of hype towards what we're working towards, is the ability to attribute that value. And once you have the attribution, you can optimize the value and you can improve it, because you can now understand where you need to spend more money. We'll need to question the investment. But the data income statement that you work towards is really, it's about the strategic investment. So you don't really want to have the operational stuff in there. You can almost clump them together. But we really need to think about, and I almost see this as sort of twofold, right? So again, back to an example. One of our banking clients, what they specifically do is they literally have two separate sets of data analytics projects as well as investments. And the ones is the run of the mill, every day there's a BI request comes through, or somebody needs to update the table, those type of things. And that they really see as the operational stuff. They understand the value from it at a high level. They can see that, there's something coming out of it. And they have certain KPIs around certain requests needs to be resolved, et cetera, et cetera. On the other side, it's more around, we have these high level, high impact projects and initiatives where there's these big ticket items that we need to do, and that's moving the needle for us. And those ones are seen as the strategic ones. If we move towards something like the data income statement, you almost put this as the overall health or the run of the mill business as usual stuff for your data analytics function. Whereas for these strategic projects, it's the high level, and you put these ones by name. Because the main reason for this is you want to know who's owning these initiatives, who's involved in it, and what's the expected outcome thereof. It's very difficult to measure the expected outcome of refreshing a dashboard every single day, but you can measure it on the decisions that gets made based on the dashboard that gets updated. So you can do it on the dashboard level itself, but you can't go down to the, let's call it the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts stuff, because that also detracts from the concept of value. You can spend more time trying to measure it than more than likely the value that you'll realize from it.
Yeah. It's a little interjection now, time for audience questions. So I'd like to reach out to anybody that's listening in. Give me some examples what you believe you would state on that basis as a strategic investment versus a project expense. So examples either of you going, hey, Zjaén, I've got this situation now, give me some free consulting, or hey, we hit this and it's something that it came up as a project expense, but might have actually been something that in the return on investment should have been up in their strategic investment. So anything from the floor that you can do. But I see also we got a question which I had it in my little back pocket. Most of us are running agile. So we run a lot of DataBot projects. That's very much an agile iteration. So this strategic is, if you look at it horribly, it's very non-agile versus a project expense, which is, hey, I'm iterating through. How do we get can we have both? Can we have something that's a strategic flow, but implement it in an agile way?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's one of those scenarios where you can have your cake and eat it too. And the main reason is, I think this is very important, right? So if we look at strategic investments, it by no means means that it's going to be rigid and you're going to go away for 6 months and then only come back to produce that value. What you want to get, and this is where Agile really works well, but measuring it at the right level. So example would be is if you're implementing as an let's call it a credit scoring model, where you want to understand, which customers you're going to extend credit to versus not. If you incrementally improve it over time, so you run your 2 weekly sprints, whatever it is, and you're really adjusting and adapting as time goes on, and you're bringing new data in and optimizing. Over time, the value that you realize from it will improve. Well, it should improve if you're doing the right things. So ideally, you want to have that continuous measurement of value in increments to say, by the end of month 1, how much value did we realize? Where did the value come from? And also to extend the attribution component, which areas of the models or the work that we did showcase the most value. And incrementally, as you build it out, then you track that value. Because at the program level, you will define to say, if we're making this investment, so let's call it you're implementing a data vault deployment at a customer, and obviously there's certain use cases that needs to be enabled, is with that we see the overall value of the strategic project being X, right? So let's call it, it's $10 million that you're working towards as an overall value realization or enablement component. But you can't go away for like 24 months, implement it, come back and then say, ta-da, there's your $10 million. You want to incrementally show that value. And the best way to do that is through agile deployment. This also keeps people engaged, right? Specifically your C-suite, to say, but I'm good. I'm happy that I made this investment because I can continuously see that value is being delivered, rather than you just going away and not informing me and keeping me updated around the value that is being generated. So very, very good alignment there between the concept of being agile, from an agile approach to developing stuff, as well as then measuring it in an agile manner as well. Right? So the core principle remains the same, but what you don't want to do is measure the value of every single change request and functional request, etc. There needs to be components of value, incremental value, and this is where something like milestones can really help put a bit more clear focus on those value components.
And that, so let me just try a bit there in that. So that piece of implementing the model. So the strategic investment would be to make the functionality of deploying a model. And that you would have this thing of, we know that we got 4 models lined up. and implementing those would be part of your return on investment calculation, but not, hey, we just thought of a new model. Not necessarily. We just thought of a new model. Let's implement it, and then let's add that to the value. It will come, but it's not necessarily part of the strategic flow.
Yeah,
cool.
No, definitely.
Yeah. And then, right, so we've got this bit around strategic structure, but that's in many of the organizations I work in moving up to those business objectives. Business objectives sometimes have very much a right, we've got to hit end of quarter numbers, or wow, you're asking for a big organizational change, and Kotter's embedding change comes in nicely. So in setting that out, can you is it do you need to have the definitive at the start, or can you still go, look, it feels strong enough? I may, I've got maybe near 80%. And look, let's go on that basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a good question. Back to my earlier statement of, you sort of start with a company strategy and see what you do aligns back to it. What we found is that, some companies have really well-defined strategic objectives and pillars, and you can see that, they spend countless hours in boardrooms trying to bash this thing out and really understanding what it means for their core business. So there's a clear alignment around what the business should be doing versus how they're measuring success against themselves. But realistically, more often than not, you will either find that it's very generic, the high level, very highly aggregated, very disconnected strategic objectives. And I understand sometimes why people do this. It's very difficult to drive accountability if it's very vague around the statements. But then we also deal with industries and customers where they don't have a clearly defined business strategy yet. Or they're going through massive transition or M&As, whatever it might be, where for them, at this point in time, it does not make sense to actually put something pen to paper. Or we're dealing with, in some cases, and we've seen this quite a lot in, let's call it agile companies, but really like digital first organizations, where they change in direction every other week to stay at the top of their game. They don't have a 6 months or a 12-month business plan. And typically the way that we then address that is to say, but if you don't have those things clearly defined, or you don't have a clear way of linking what you're doing back to those initiatives, you can start asking basic questions. And those typical things would be is what are the 5 questions that I need to be able to answer within my business? What's keeping my CEO awake at night, or my CFO awake at night? What are the things that's top of mind for them, the things that they worry about? Or alternatively is, what are we trying to achieve as a business in a general sense? If there's some sort of common understanding around, we want to build out the best platform in the world, a digital platform. And because of this, we know that data becomes a core component or a core asset into that ecosystem. So you can really use that as a basis for that investment, or justifying that investment from a strategic perspective. You don't always have to have clearly defined strategies. But what we've also seen, James, and this helps, is one, if you're in an environment where that doesn't exist, this can also help you frame those in terms of what strategic objectives or business objectives you ideally need to focus on, and starting from the data perspective upwards, rather than from the business downstream.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just thinking of that moving and shaking, and a bit of the M&A client I've got at the moment is, so we've got acquisitions and we've got retention, and they got in a position where the acquisitions was low, the retention was high. So in overall terms, it evened up. So, but what we had was, because we had an overall strategic engagement, a strategic piece of, well, look, this is the path that we got for acquisition. This is the path we got retention. We could look at where the signals were, and in this case, it was heavy competitor interaction. We were being good because of the good customer services, and I'll do the we because I was working closely with them. We were being good at customer services, and the retention was high, but getting new customers were really hard. So although we'd got things lined up to go, let's actually pin to the acquisition, we needed to rethink those. Whereas the strategic investment we'd made on retention, we'd actually doubled up and go, look, this is hurting. We haven't worked out our thing, but if we keep on and keep the oversight on the ROI is still going, we're not losing people that we didn't expect that. So I think that in terms of a moving and shaking organization, having it's almost having things in your toolkit that you sort of had ready, and exercising them when you need. That's actually a really cool thing. But yeah, and then but that required pre-thought. That required what are the things that are driving the company, where are the KPIs, and what are the sources coming from, and how have we got it in terms of the data piece. So if we've got one of those coming in, if we had that thing in terms of the acquisition is going soft, and somebody comes up with an idea, how do we go that initiative still aligns with the strategic business value?
Yeah. I mean, I think if there's sort of two sides to this, if we look at current investments, into data analytics. So now if you have a current program running, project running, or certain initiative that you've identified, probably the easiest test would be to determine is this thing getting the right priority and support from the stakeholders or shareholders, in terms of if you're asking for additional funding, are you getting it? If we're busy executing this, are all parties aligned, right? And so when you're sitting in that boardroom with the exco and the CEO and the CFO asks, listen, give me a progress update. I want to understand what's happening. Are you just getting one guy in the room that says, hey, we are working on it, but we're not really getting traction from it? Or can you see collaboration amongst departments to say, listen, we're busy optimizing these models, and then you'll get a response from IT to say, but we've implemented new things in the system and enabled new capabilities. And then business would say, yeah, but we've appointed a few new people and we've activated our call centers. And there's almost this joint contribution and collaboration around what we are delivering value. And that's probably the easiest way to see if a data and AI initiative is strategically aligned with business value. And I mean, it's back to my earlier example around, the telco making the data platform investment. It would have been really easy after the first month to determine if this thing was strategically aligned or not. And the easy question there would have been is, what are you enabling from a business perspective? That what can we do today that we couldn't do yesterday because of this investment that we made? And if you can't answer that question, then there's no alignment. Then it's just something that was somebody thought out that we need to do it, and it needs to be done. I mean, it's obviously there's also clear things around you are able to see net results, you're able to measure value, you're able to attribute value, and let's call it 80% of the value that will be realized or can be realized would be determinant value, right? So you put actual dollar signs to it.
Yep.
It's not going to be I call them the warm fuzzies of, but if we have this platform, it's going to reduce our efforts. I mean, it's bad, but unfortunately it's what happens. And this is what frustrates, the CFO the most is that they really get a lot of these questions. And then when they ask the question, it's like, yeah, but everybody else is doing AI and now we can also do it. Yeah, but what does it mean to my business? Yeah.
And I will do another. So everybody else, we need somebody more than Julian. He's hogging the space. So that piece, and I'm going to paraphrase it, or I'm going to skew it slightly. So we talked about things that we go, hey, we've got initiative that is probably a reaction to that thing of like, hey, we're a bit soft in acquisition. So when we come in and one of those comes in, do we reject it because it doesn't look strategic, or do we pigeonhole it in to make it look strategic? How do we take those things in when business is hurting?
Yeah, I mean, sanity needs to prevail, right? It's unfortunately, if the house is burning, you can't go and build the fire truck first, right? If you have if you have a few containers buckets you can fill with water or get a hose pipe going, that would work. And I mean, I always use this example, James, of the bottling plant, right? So if the immediate need is just somebody that's thirsty, give them a glass of water. if somebody has a requirement for, they have, they're a bit sensitive to just normal tap water, you can go and you can get them a bottle water, like one single bottle water. But if you see that this thirst would be something that would continuous, there would be continuous requirement for this, and more than likely the scale would be significantly high, you're going to open up a water bottling plant, because then, there's a continuous view for this. And I almost use that as an example where, the business as usual stuff is somebody just needs a glass of water, right? And you can give them a glass of water. And some of that might require a bit more work. But where investment is required, or significant investment is required, those ones we almost separate out as the strategic ones, because there we need to ask the question around, am I going to see the return on this investment? And is this investment a good one? But obviously, all things being equal, sometimes there would be something where the house is burning now and there's something that needs to happen now. And those ones can also be seen as strategic, in the essence of, I need to do this to reduce risk, right? There's new legislation that comes out, or there's a new cyber threat that comes out, and I now need to do something for my organization. You don't have the luxury of time to jump through 10,000 hoops, but the main driver there would be risk. So the concept of value will still hold true. But it's also the scale of it, right? So glasses of water, single bottles of water, that would typically be your business as usual, the small requests, the small dashboards, quick insights. Just quickly give me a view of what's happening with our customers in a certain region. Or build me a POC just to show me that this works, right? So that's not necessarily strategic. The strategic stuff is where, the best rule of thumb there would be is, if I do this today, in 14 months' time, do I foresee a scenario where my CFO is going to ask me, where's the value from this request? And if the CFO is not going to ask you, then it's just BAU.
Yeah. And look in that, to that thing of, if it's a market reacting initiative, it's almost that it should tie into one of those KPIs anyway, of something in acquisition was on here. Acquisition retention are in here, but it rolls up to something in the terms of overall business revenue. So if I've got something in here and it's like a slightly reactive piece, it might still turn into something strategic. But looking at my example there was a competitor came into market, is like, can they really survive that long if they're doing 3% off the next loan? It's like, no. So let's do something in a reactive term. It's not as strategic because we don't believe it's going to be sitting in there. But yeah, we've hit it at the appropriate terms, and it's still got a pin to a KPI.
Yep.
So to that thing of coming in and saying, I've got